Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Felice Smith.
And I'm Monte Belmonte.
Later in the show, we'll talk about the return of Green and Fit Springfield, a volunteer cleanup event happening this Saturday. And we've got a whole lot of hip-hop with Akrobatic, a rapper and UMass Boston lecturer coming to Bombyx this weekend as part of the Power of Truths Festival. And we'll talk with Chef David Schrier, bringing the hip-hop legend Large Professor to his restaurant daily operation in Easthampton this Saturday. But first...
Time for our weekly conversation with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Worcester's own Jim McGovern, a segment we like to call McGoverning with McGovern. You can send in any of your questions for the Congressman, whether you're in his district or not, at the fab413@nepm.org, or you can text us anytime, 1-800-639-9120. Congressman, we all got a little glimpse into how the sausage gets made this week in regards to the debt ceiling. From NPR, after overcoming internal divisions, the Republican-led House of Representatives approved a bill Wednesday, led by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, that links lifting the country's debt ceiling with spending cuts and a series of GOP policy changes. There were a couple of overnight concerns addressed by GOP members. They eliminated the plan that was going to repeal tax credits for ethanol products. Ultimately, it was passed by a 2-vote margin. 4 Republicans pulled away from Speaker McCarthy. And you were tweeting about an all-night session in the Rules Committee. Give us a glimpse into what went on this week with your committee and in the House of Representatives with this debt ceiling debate.
So the Rules Committee is the committee that every bill has to go through before it goes to the House floor, and so this bill being no exception. We had over 6 hours of testimony, and then we adjourned because the Republicans didn't seem to have the votes. And notwithstanding the fact that Kevin McCarthy said not a word would be changed, they were contemplating changes. We were told to come back and meet at 11:30 at night, so all the Democrats came back to the Rules Committee at 11:30 at night, and we sat there until 12:15, and then we're told, well, we have to make some changes, come back at 1:45 a.m., and so around 2 o'clock we began to consider the bill, and some of the changes, by the way, were not just the ones that you just mentioned, but included making it easier and quicker to throw people off of their health care. So apparently the bill wasn't mean enough for some of my Republican colleagues, so they made it meaner. And then at about 2:45, we reported on the Rules Committee, and then we were on the floor yesterday, and I handled the rule for the Democrats. And this is a terrible, terrible, terrible bill for a whole bunch of reasons. At issue here is whether America pays its bills. We have paid our bills in the past, and we should pay our bills. It's like a credit card bill. You accumulate this debt, and you have to pay when your bill comes in. If you don't, your credit rating gets damaged. And in this case, we don't pay our bills. Not only will our credit rating be damaged, we could see another recession. We could see major job loss. Wall Street could crash. I mean, all kinds of horrific things will happen. And we have a vote until July to figure this out. But what the Republicans did is they said, we're not going to let you raise the debt ceiling. What we want to do is we're going to not give you a debt ceiling bill. We're going to give you a ransom note. And the ransom note is, in order for us to be able to lift the debt ceiling, to keep the economy afloat, you have to agree to 10 years of draconian cuts in everything, with the exception of defense spending, and you can't touch the tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, which means about a 22% cut in everything else, which means that 1 million people would lose their SNAP benefits. Meals on Wheels would be cut. Veterans' health care would be cut. Environmental protection would be cut. Everything would be cut. And it's a statement of their values, and quite frankly, I don't share their values. It's perfectly okay to say we should have a discussion about getting our fiscal house in order. We ought to have that discussion on the budget and on the appropriations bills. But getting our fiscal house in order by just sticking it to poor people and to regular people, in my opinion, is unacceptable and unconscionable.
The Democrats are spinning this as the Default on America Act, and it does have a bunch of different things that you've mentioned in regards to different cuts that they're asking for. Has this happened in your time as a congressman where the debt ceiling debate was being used as a negotiation for the budget? Because I think, as you've even alluded to here, it makes sense to debate what is going to go into a budget, what programs are cut, what programs are better funded. Has the debt ceiling debate been used, even by your own party, in this way before?
Well, I mean, the debt ceiling should not be politicized. And when Donald Trump was president, we voted to raise the debt ceiling 3 times. I mean, I didn't agree with Donald Trump's priorities. I mean, I didn't agree with the bills he accumulated, especially tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations, added trillions of dollars to our national debt. But those bills were accumulated, liked it or not. had to pay for them. And in the past, when people have tried to use the debt ceiling, as a cudgel, to be able to get something, it usually doesn't work very well. And in fact, it sets a precedent that means that here we are. And by the way, what they're suggesting here is that we go along with them on these cuts, but we're going to be back again in a year to have the same discussion. As I said, they had to change the bill in the Rules Committee at 2 a.m. because the right wing is fighting with the extreme right wing. For some of these people on the extreme right wing, this isn't even mean enough now. A handful of them voted no on it because they want even deeper cuts to programs that help people. I should tell you, as an interesting footnote, the vote that put them into the majority on this was George Santos. If that's what his real name is. I don't even know what the hell his name is. But anyway, so just understand where we are. Look, what you ought to do is let's pay our bills. America pays our bills. If you don't pay your bills, there are consequences that will impact everybody. This is not just some academic debate. This could have a real impact on our credit rating, on interest rates, on investments, on jobs. I mean, we can't fool around with this. This game of Russian roulette that the Republicans are playing, quite frankly, represents an all-time high in recklessness and stupidity. We ought to stop this. You don't want to vote for the debt ceiling increase? Don't vote for it. You don't want to pay our bills? Then fine. Go on record as saying you don't want to pay our bills. But let's get that done, and then let's fight over our budget priorities. Look, Republicans control the House. I'm really upset about that, but it's the reality. I'm not going to get all that I want in terms of these budget priorities, but we ought to begin that negotiation and start moving toward making sure we fund the government at the end of the year, but not playing this dangerous game with our economy.
US Congressman Jim McGovern. McGoverning with McGovern. We're talking about the debt ceiling debate that was going on all this week, which narrowly passed on Wednesday. And you are saying that some of this stuff should be up for debate. I know the Farm Bill is up for debate, and that could be where a lot of things like SNAP and food stamps, which were part of this issue in regards to what you're saying is holding the debt hostage, were wedged into the Republicans' plan here and Speaker McCarthy's plan. One of those issues is raising the age of the mandatory work requirement to 55 or 56. I've actually seen it at 2 different places. I'm not sure exactly where that ended up landing. There is a work requirement to be on SNAP or food stamps for people of a certain age and people of certain abilities already, which I think a lot of people don't know about. Do you think that this is going to be a dead in the water bill with this debt ceiling with the Republicans here, and that this will all come up again when the Farm Bill actually is debated a little bit later this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is coming attractions of what we can expect in the Farm Bill. Let me just say this. The chairman of the Budget Committee, who authored this bill, came before the Rules Committee, and the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee came before the committee. And I asked them just about the topic you just raised. And I asked them, who are these people who you think should be working who are not working? Do you know who they are? Did you do a hearing to find out who this population is? And I got a blank stare. The reality is the people we're talking about are people who are homeless, undiagnosed mental illnesses, living in rural areas that don't have access to transportation to get to anything. It's a complicated population. I then asked them, do you know what is the average length that somebody is on SNAP, given the fact that they feel so strongly about, curtailing this program? And they didn't know. I said, well, the average person on SNAP is on it for less than a year. I then asked them this really tough question, which was, do you know what the average SNAP benefit is per day? What does somebody on SNAP get on average per day for their food? They had no idea. I said, it's $6 a day, $2 a meal. So that's what we're talking about here. And the fact that the chairman of the 2 committees that brought this bill to the floor had no clue about any of this stuff tells you, where their mindset is. They don't care about the reality. All they care about is a narrative that plays to the cheap seats, that beats up on poor people, that basically tries to demonize anybody who may need the benefit. Because the fact of the matter is the majority of able-bodied adults without dependents who can work and who are on SNAP actually do work. And that's an inconvenient reality for the Republicans. And in the Farm Bill, they're talking about extending the work requirement to able-bodied adults with children. And one of the proposals would be that if you have a child who is 7 years old or older, then in order for you to get SNAP, you have to, there is a work requirement. Now, I mean, I don't know how they're going to afford childcare. People's lives are complicated. A lot of people with children who are on SNAP already do work. Let's understand the complexities of life, the realities that people deal with. I mean, everything can't just be, these sound bites and everything fits into a nice category. Life is complicated. If you are low income, if you are struggling, just to put food on the table, life can be overwhelming. So let's help people get food, because that's all this is about. It's food. And let's just try to help get people on a steady footing so they can be the kinds of parents they want to be, so they can feed their families. This should not be a radical idea. But the ignorance, the lack of knowledge of the authors of this bill, not even to take the time to even understand what the program is, to me was just stunning.
Congressman McGovern, your office announced this week that next week there'll be a big formal announcement that the Jones Library in Amherst is getting $2 million in federal funding to support preserving its history and renovating its facilities. Where did that $2 million come from for the Jones Library in Amherst?
Some of it came from an earmark that we put into the appropriations bill last year. Some of it comes from, the energy portions of the appropriations bills and the Inflation Reduction Act that can help deal with some of the issues that can make the library more energy efficient and kind of in compliance with kind of our green vision of the future. Look, I love libraries.
Me too.
And I love that library. Jones Library is really incredible. And we need to support our libraries, especially now when we have people trying to ban books, trying to censor what people have access to, and trying to control, what is in our libraries. We need to support our libraries. They need to be as user-friendly. They need to be as, modern in terms of technology so that people can have access to everything. And we need to celebrate our libraries. And so I'm really happy that we're going to be able to do that next week.
A listener question from our regular questioner, Dr. Dave Gottsagen, who works at Holyoke Pediatric Associates, asking, he says, we're in the midst of a medicine shortage crisis. In his 30-plus years as a physician, he's never seen anything like it. It was Tylenol and Motrin, then antibiotics for kids, then ADHD meds. Pharmacists tell him that there's a shortage of adult meds, too. The shortages come and go. There's no rhyme or reason. When he prescribes a substitute, insurance won't cover it. He says a pharmacist friend says the NSA is investigating, and he adds he's not one for conspiracy theories, but is this big pharma trying to get back at Joe Biden for trying to regulate drug prices? He thinks Congress needs to investigate. What do you know about this drug shortage that Holyoke pediatric Dr. Dave Gottsagen is talking about?
Well, I appreciate the question from Dr. Dave, but I've heard that from others as well. And we're trying to get to the bottom of it to figure out, what is the cause of this? I mean, there doesn't seem to be a shortage in the supply chain. Why is it that we're getting these reports that there are people are having difficulty getting access to certain drugs? Before I get into the conspiracy theory realm, we're trying to get some answers here. We will stay tuned on this, but Dr. Dave is not the first person that's reached out to us, and we've reached out to HHS to figure out what is their take on it, and we're waiting for them to get back to us, and I'll report back to you.
Last question politically, a big announcement from your party this week that President Biden will seek a second term. There's been a lot of conversation about his level of popularity, his efficacy, his handling of certain domestic and foreign issues, as well as his age. What's your take on the Biden announcement that he's running for a second term as president?
He made the announcement. I support him for re-election, and I believe that he will win. And I get it. I mean, all these issues that people raise, those are legitimate issues for people to talk about. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to vote for or against Joe Biden because of his youthful looks or lack thereof. I'm going to vote for him based on the issues that I care about and on the policies that I think will be good for this country and for the world. There's an awful lot at stake. We have come out of a pandemic. We have made some incredible progress. We've passed some important legislation, the biggest infrastructure bill in history, the Inflation Reduction Act to take on the challenge of climate change, the CHIPS Act to deal with supply chain issues, and we are pushing back on some of the bigoted and backward policies of the previous administration. Is he perfect? No. But I don't know I can't remember the last time I voted for a perfect politician. Maybe once when I first ran for office, but then I served a couple of years. And I wasn't so perfect anymore. But I voted for me again for re-election because I was better than the other guys. So at the end of the day, I mean, this is about our values. This is about policies and things that matter in our lives, and that's where the focus needs to be. And again, if it's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, I mean, please, for the sake of the world, we need to make sure that Joe Biden gets reelected.
US Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Congressman Jim McGovern, a weekly segment. You can send questions for the Congressman, and I'll ask them on your behalf. The Fab413 at nepm.org, or you can text us 1-800-639-9120. Thanks as always, Congressman.
All the best. Be safe.
Coming up, Colleen Shanley Lovelace, President and CEO, and Ethel Griffin, Director of Programs, both from Revitalized Community Development Corporation. Didn't think that would be hard to say, about the return of Green and Fit Springfield, a volunteer cleanup event happening this Saturday. And we'll talk with Chef David Schrier, bringing up the hip-hop legend, Large Professor, to his restaurant daily operation this Saturday.
Up next, Boston-based rapper and UMass Boston visiting lecturer Akrobatic, and Michael Lawrence Riddell from Self-Evident Education, bringing the Power of Truths Festival to Bombyx in Florence this weekend.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on NEPM.
Yo, my name is Akrobatic and I don't smoke crack.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. The second annual Power of Truths Arts and Education Festival is this Saturday and Sunday, April 29th and 30th in Florence at the Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity, and we have two folks involved with the festival here now.
Michael Lawrence Riddell is the Executive Director of Self-Evident Education, a nonprofit dedicated to helping educators and communities in their quests to honestly and rigorously understand the histories and legacies of systemic racism.
Jared Bridgman, better known by his stage name Akrobatic, is a hip-hop artist from the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston, where Khalees grew up and where I was born. In addition to his powerful music message and stage show, Akrobatic is an educator currently teaching at UMass Boston. Thank you both for being with us in the Fabulous 413 today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Now,
yeah, glad to be with you.
Excellent. Mr. LR, Michael Lawrence Riddell,
Yes, sir.
former public school educator who kind of left to develop this programming, which has become controversial in this country all of a sudden, to really honestly look at the history of racism in this country. That has turned into Self-Evident Education, and an offshoot of that is this Power of Truths Festival happening this weekend in Florence. Tell us about the Power of Truths Festival and what to expect before we dig in with Akrobatic, who's with us.
Yeah, definitely. So, the Power of Truths, it'll be 2 days filled with community conversations, all centered around the power of arts and education to change the world, right? So we're bringing in people, educators, artists, performers, scholars, authors, podcast hosts, just a wide variety of people who are all going to present different views, different perspectives, centered around, again, that central idea of the power of arts and education to help us change the world, to use arts and education to understand our past so we can better understand our present and envision and build a just future. That's the central work of the festival.
One of the people who will be in multiple roles there,
Yes.
as an educator and as a performer, joins us.
And presenter.
And presenter is Akrobatic, Jared Bridgman, who's a
Yes,
guest
indeed.
lecturer at UMass Boston, teaching about the history of hip-hop and hip-hop as history. Coming up a little bit later, we're going to talk about Large Professor, who's going to be performing in Easthampton that same night, who's part of Living Hip-Hop History, which is so
There's
excellent.
a pile of hip-hop happening in the
Yes,
Fort Wayne
and
Free
then there's a
on
tribute to
Saturday.
Native Tongues happening on Saturday
I
in
know,
Springfield.
It's like
so-
we're getting it all out in one shot.
Yeah, I want to spread it out a little bit more, or just make it happen every weekend,
Right.
which seems...
Yeah, just keep it going all the time. That's right.
Exactly.
So tell me about your class at UMass Boston, and is any of that going to be coming to this festival happening this weekend, the Power of Truths Festival?
Well, again, thanks for having us. And as far as the class at UMass, right now I'm currently teaching 2 courses. They're slightly different, but they both focus intensely on the origin story of hip hop. We get to have guests and practitioners from different elements of the culture come in and talk to the class. I do a lot of lecturing myself and share a lot of my experiences over the last quarter century that I've been out there doing it as a pro. You know what I mean? So it's like hip hop's had 50 years and I've been there half the time as a professional doing my thing. So I probably got 1 or 2 things to share in a classroom setting, you know what I mean? And so the students seem to appreciate that a lot. We have an American Studies course that really focuses on, serious events in American history, particularly modern American history, and hip hop's response to them. And that really coincides with what we're doing with Power of Truths. And then I have an honors college course, which focuses on all those things, but then also really zooms out and looks at global hip hop and hip hop around the world, and how it's become just a powerful voice, a powerful platform for people all over the world, whether it's, women in Iran speaking out for women's rights. You know what I mean? It could be people in Brazil making music that speaks to the political climate, especially with everything that was going on during the pandemic and stuff like that. So there's so many places where hip hop pops up in world culture, and it really is a cool opportunity as an artist myself to be able to teach about those things.
Does it feel different teaching at UMass Boston than it did teaching at Prospect Hill's charter school with like the younger folks?
Where at Prospect Hills?
Oh, Prospect Hill Charter School is in Cambridge. So
that's officially where I got my. And thanks for doing your research on that. That's where I got my official start as a teacher in 2013. Was with Prospect Hill Charter School in Cambridge. And it was a little different in that, in high school, not everyone wants to be at school every day. So there's an element of your audience, being disinterested just because it's school, not because it's you or because it's your topic that you're teaching, but because I was coming in with the topic that was, to most of them infinitely more interesting than most of the things that they're hearing about in school. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that kind of gave me a leg up. But in college, I mean, it was a great experience at Prospect Hill, and I'm still in touch with some of my students from back then. They're doing amazing work. One artist that jumps out of my mind right now, he goes by My Compiled Thoughts, and he's an R&B singer. At the time when I was teaching him, he was like just a kid with some ideas, and he had some rhymes and a couple of notes here and there, and now he's making some of the best just most beautiful R&B art that I've seen from anybody in years. So you get to see people's growth arc as artists too, doing this stuff. But at UMass, everybody's paying tuition, and it's an elective course, so for sure that everybody in the room wants to be there. So they're just ready to go right from the very beginning, and they really do seem to take well to the idea of learning from an artist who actually has been there, who's known and met a lot of the artists. We use a lot of work from Chuck D and his PBS documentary during our course, and I get to tell them, Chuck D is my mentor. I get to talk to him, you know what I mean? And they're just like, oh, and then I'll really go crazy on him and be like, I opened up for Eminem at his first ever show in Boston. So then from there, they're eating out of the palm of my hand for the rest of the semester.
Right on.
Not
to mention that Chuck D's making educational moves like across the board, and genreless too.
He's who I want to be when I grow up. You know what I mean?
Me too.
All the way from as an MC, performer, just as a grown man, and as an educator, and as an artist, and just as somebody who understands what to do even with his downtime properly. The man's got multiple books of his artistic sketches and things like that he just does in hotels while he's on the road and things like that. He's just I feel like he's mastered human existence. So I definitely respect him a lot.
We're speaking with Akrobatic, who is going to be part of the Power of Truth conference and festival happening this Saturday and Sunday at Bombyx in Florence. And we're talking about Chuck D. And, of course, his work has been merged politics and activism and art so frequently. And that's sort of what you've been doing with some of your teaching as well. And you mentioned that there's a couple of points, even in contemporary American history, that you're talking about where hip-hop had a major impact, and that's going to bleed into a little bit of what's happening at the Power of Truth Festival. What are some of those moments that stand out to you, Akrobatic, that people want to hear about and focus on in that history?
Well, with Power of Truths, we go way back, and with hip-hop, you don't get as many opportunities to go so far back to the 1700s, 1800s, but we have these moments that in these last 50 years of hip hop, when these moments happen, people step up, and hip hop is where you can get the perspective of, kind of like the perspective of the people that things are happening to. versus, the media who's just kind of watching it and reporting it as something that happened. So when I think of Hurricane Katrina and the music that came out from different artists around that time and the different commentaries that were made, I mean, even commercial artists like Lil Wayne, he had a song that was going at George Bush pretty hard, Georgia Bush, I think he was calling him in the song. And, I had a track called Kindred, which actually did go back to the like antebellum South and address some things there the same way the TV show does. And then also brings it back, though, in a kind of time travel way to the events of Katrina, which is kind of what the TV show does there, too. So, that, or like 9/11, my best friend, Mr. Liff, who is my partner in The Perceptionists, he made a classic hip hop track called Home of the Brave after the events of 9/11, where he was one of few artists to step up and question the United States in terms of its involvement in the aftermath and, going to war after that, and just really speaking out in a way that maybe, some media people might say it's unpatriotic to question what your country does. But I feel like Liff in that moment stood up and said, no, it's actually the most patriotic thing you can do, because I know what my country is supposed to stand for, and the behavior of the country doesn't seem to be in line with that right now. And as a citizen who's here and pays taxes and is free, I'm going to use my First Amendment right to say exactly what the heck I want to say about what the government is doing around the world. And so hip hop has that power. That's power beyond imagination 100 years ago for Black people. You know what I mean? So we have that now, and the way that we have mastered a language that we weren't even meant to read in the first place, we weren't even supposed to learn, we've mastered it and done the most with it in such a short period of time. And now we're using it to bring back to light things that either were long since forgotten or never learned in the first place, that will help us have a clearer vision to what's going on now. And I think that that's pretty much what Power of Truths, and Mike, you can back me up or correct me if I'm wrong. That's pretty much the aim of what we're trying to do.
That's Akrobatic,
Right.
the educator and hip hop artist from Dorchester, who will be part of this Power of Truths conference this weekend. Mr. LR, Michael Lawrence Riddell, apart from hip-hop, there's more that's happening at this festival. Can you tell us about a couple of the other people who will be presenting or performing at the Power of Truths Festival?
Yeah, certainly. I just and just to build a little bit on a few things that Ak was talking about, the ideas of, that Mr. Liff was getting at about how the ideals of this country and are not being lived up to is at the center of the work that we do at Self-Evident, right? We're doing work to examine stories where the professed ideals of the United States of America are out of joint with the actual practices, right? And so that's what we'll be doing on Saturday night during the show called Know the Ledge Hip Hop History Live. We're going to be exploring some of the stories from the Self-Evident Education Library of documentary films through music, through dance, joined by people like Khalif Neville, Marcia Gomes, Dutch Rebel. 3 folks are coming out from Tulsa, from Fire in Little Africa Project, Written Quincy, Christina Suarez, and I Am Dez, both part of Suarez Republic. So they'll be doing a set that really explores the histories and the legacies of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. And then in addition to that, on top of that, we're going to premiere our newest film, which is called If You Cross This Boundary, We All Die, which tells the story of William and Ellen Craft and their self-emancipation from slavery, and really digs into that idea that Ak was talking about literacy as a tool for liberation, right? The ways in which literacy can be taken and used as a tool for liberation. And that'll be followed up on the next day with a panel discussion with Ilian Wu, author of Master Slave Husband Wife, about the crafts, Liz Pryor, Kelly Carter Jackson, those phenomenal scholars, people who are award-winning authors are going to join us to talk about the histories and the legacies of the crafts and of other freedom seekers, and why those stories are so important now, right? Why we need to know this history right now in the face of attacks on democracy and truth, right? And honest and accurate history. There are literal attacks. Like, I was told I couldn't present to a group of teachers in Texas because they thought that it would be breaking the law for me to talk about history, about things that we have vetted and verified and done the research. These are true stories, but I'm told it's illegal. And that's problematic, man. That's an assault on democracy. And so, that's what we'll be talking about at the Power of Truths with people who are much smarter than I am. And, we'll wow you, the people that we have put together. So please come join us. It's going to be phenomenal.
That is Michael Lawrence Riddell, who is from Self-Evident Education and one of the organizers of the Power of Truth conference happening this Saturday. And we were delighted to be joined by Akrobatic, the local hip-hop legend from Dorchester, and
Don't know
educator.
what part of Dorchester you're from, but shout out to Fields Corner.
Oh, that's what's up. My rap styles change like Rodman's hair. It's Akrobatic representing Codman Square. You know what I'm saying?
And he'll be part of the festival as well this weekend. Thank you both so much. Later in the show, President and CEO Colleen Shanley Lovelace and Director of Programming Ethel Griffin of Revitalized CDC about Green and Fit Springfield, a volunteer cleanup event happening this Saturday.
And up next, Chef David Schrier bringing up the hip-hop legend Large Professor to his restaurant daily operation this Saturday. You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on NEPM.
If you went to college and you were waiting for a class to begin and your professor didn't show up, depending on whether they were like tenured or PhD or whatever, with 5 or 10 minutes, if they don't show up, you could just leave and it would be an unexcused absence. And so we're in a little bit of that situation with a bona fide hip-hop legend, Large Professor, who is coming to play at Daily Operations, which is a restaurant in Easthampton, this Saturday. So our hope is that Large Professor shows up for this class because we want to get some hip-hop education from him.
But in the meantime, we got a wicked cool TA.
Yeah, we do.
That's right.
And he has been doing some amazing things in regards to bringing live hip-hop to the 413. It is the Best Chef nominee for the James Beard Award, David Schrier from Daily Operation in Easthampton, along with your wife, Jessica Pollard there.
And Dave Clegg, our partner as well.
And Dave Clegg. So kudos to that. That's a huge honor. It's like the Oscars of restaurants. But you're bringing Large Professor and more to Daily Operation this Saturday. Tell us about why live music and hip-hop at the kind of restaurant that you run.
Yeah, so when we moved to our new location, one of the things we wanted to do, just because we had the space, was try to have a live music component. And we built a stage. We didn't really know, kind of the level that we would be doing and who would be getting. Would we just be mostly doing local? We just didn't know how it was going to roll. So we kind of took it from there, the same way that we did food when we first opened. We didn't exactly know what the menu was going to be. We just kind of went with what we felt. And it turned out that... Let
me stop you right there. Tell me about the menu, because the menu is also really weird, eclectic in the best way.
Yeah, so the menu kind of from day one, it's exactly that. So people always ask us the same question, which is, what kind of food do you do? And it's a really tough question to answer just because...
No, the answer is yes.
It's a tough question to answer because we do so many different styles from around the world. But ultimately, the two focuses are making sure that we're always using local farms and what they have throughout the year. That dictates the menu in the biggest way, just what's available and what we can get. Because the menu is ever changing and ever evolving. So that goes with the seasons, and that goes with what we're excited about and also what we're bored with. So sometimes people will be like, oh, you took off Stoner Slaw, you took off Meatloaf. Yeah, we just got bored. So if you see things disappear, it's just because we're not excited about it at that moment, and we try to move on. But yeah, ultimately we do all different types of stuff. But yeah, the three of us and then our chef de cuisine, Josh, we always kind of collaborate on making new menu items. But
not to roll with a theme, but just tell them that those items are on sabbatical.
Sabbatical, yeah, no, that's
I like
perfect.
It.
That's perfect.
But what's so great about Daily Op is that it as I mentioned, you're nominated for the Oscars of food, but when you go in there, it feels very cozy, very homey, like it's got a lunch counter type feel to it, and the space industrial chic with the big mill that you've moved into in Easthampton, which makes perfect placement for if you want to put on big shows, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it was kind of tricky thinking about moving from our kind of tiny spot on Cottage Street over to this bigger location, because that was one of the biggest concerns was how to keep it cozy still and still feel comfortable and like you're chilling at home. So that took quite a bit of work to get to that point. But yeah, no, I think we did achieve it though.
So this Saturday at 8 p.m. at Daily Operation in Easthampton, you're bringing the legendary MC producer, DJ, Large Professor on a double bill. Tell us about Large Professor and the bill and why you wanted to bring these guys from New York to Easthampton.
Yeah, so Large Professor, we used to do a lot of backyard and rooftop parties in New York. Did 2 with Large Professor back then. And he was just an incredible performer, and I was such a huge fan. And it really came down to that, like, you know, I'm just very deeply into hip hop. It's a part of my life, and especially given my age, a lot of it comes from the 90s. So, you know, the heyday of his production was in the 90s. Yeah, just a massive fan. I've been listening to him since I was a teenager. Yeah, it was just kind of a natural choice when we're thinking about the programming of the shows that we're doing.
We're talking with chef owner David Schrier from Daily Operation in Easthampton, who's bringing Large Professor, who was part of the pivotal group Main Source, produced records for the legends Eric B and Rakim, sort of was at the early days of discovering Nas when he was just a teenager and working with that, another legendary hip-hop voice. Who else on this bill, David?
Yeah, so on this bill, we also have J-Live. J-Live is a really incredible MC, and also, much like Large Professor, he's also a triple threat. And by that, I mean, he DJs, he produces, and he rhymes. And you don't see that too often in hip hop. And as much as I love a lot of current hip hop that's happening, it's just not something you currently see too often. So he's just a killer. And he goes back to, you know, I think his first 12-inch, his first record was probably 95 or so. He came about in the late 90s when underground hip hop was really taking shape as kind of a reaction to the Jiggy era and Puff Daddy, yada yada. So he was part of that. He was part of that New York scene, and he was a real standout. Thirdly, we have Tableek. Tableek is from Mass Pike. Now, Mass Pike, I grew up mainly in Florida and started getting heavily into underground hip hop in the late 90s and early O's. But Mass Pike was one of those groups that just really hit me. But yeah, they're probably the most notable group from Western Mass from back then. But just boom bap, classic, good rhyming, can't beat it.
And it's all happening this Saturday at Daily Operation in Easthampton.
I see a prevalence, and we're going to get into terminology, and I'm not going to explain, and we'll just have to do it later. Like, one of the things that, as, like, kind of an old head like you, I see in the shows that you book is a lot of boom bap, and actually I feel like that's like something that's been a mainstay of hip-hop scene locally. I feel like that might not have been intentional, but it's something that you're accidentally preserving.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of internally battle with this all the time. You use the term old head, and I kind of embrace it in a good way.
Look, me too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I love that stuff to death. You know what I mean? That's what I grew up on, and I can just hear that like 87 BPM in my head kind of all day. You know what I mean? So it's a part of me. But I love so many different types of things. And, you know, our opening show was Arm & Hammer from Brooklyn, and I think they're quite the opposite of that. And they're kind of part of the new face of very exciting underground hip-hop movement that really hasn't happened since the heyday of Raucous Records and Def Jux and things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love all different types of stuff, and I think that having diverse hip-hop programming has been really great for us, because when we do these more boom bap centric shows,
which is a style, it's a sound,
yeah.
It's almost exactly as it sounds as a name.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we do these, we've been able to pull a certain group of people, and then when we do, say an Arm & Hammer show or a Quelle Chris show, pulling kind of a different group. And sometimes those two come together, you know what I mean? Sometimes there's an overlap, sometimes there's not, but it's been great to have the exposure to different types of hip-hop fans in different ages.
I don't feel like I have to do the full disclosure thing, because I've been to a couple of, like, you've brought in names that I've been like, ooh, you're getting Billy Woods? Awesome, I'm there. Yeah. or like when you brought in, like, Homeboy Sandman too, which I've heard rumor was kind of a hard get.
Oh, Sandman, yeah, it was like, one of those. Yeah, with those, it's kind of, again, just having like the right connection.
You get a good swath.
Definitely.
Of, like, a good slice across the board of what hip hop does.
Definitely, and I fully stand behind every single artist who has stepped on that stage, hip hop or otherwise. So I'm really proud of that.
Do you crate dig?
Oh yeah. No, that's up until the past like 5-6 years, a lot. But yeah, once the kids hit, it's slowed down a little bit. But yeah, no,
That's fair.
I got a lot of records.
What's your favorite thing you found? What's your favorite?
Talk about what crate digging is. If you're going to use buzzwords, you got to tell people what they mean.
Yeah, crate digging is another term that thankfully has made its way all the way to here now. But yeah, it just means you're out buying records and you're going through, older records, looking primarily for samples and loops if you're a producer in hip hop. But I think the term has expanded to kind of just a record buyer as well. Oh yeah, coolest thing I've ever found. That's a tough call. I will say the most I've ever paid for a record. I haven't bought a lot of expensive records, but in 2004, I remember I paid $75 for Large Professor, the LP bootleg, because it had not yet been released. But that was the most expensive record I've ever bought. But
and now it's come full circle.
It sure has.
Because Large Professor is coming to your restaurant this Saturday. Chef David Schrier from Daily Operation, along with J Live and Tablik of Mass Pike. If Khalees and I were to come to the restaurant tonight and want the chef's recommendation, Daily Operation, what should we get?
Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, we have 3 or 4 really cool things that are very new that we're psyched about. One is a spicy silken tofu dish as like a ginger scallion garlic sauce, pea shoots, because we're finally starting to get some of that farm stuff come in. So anytime we can use pea shoots or anything like that, we're psyched. There's a ricotta gnocchi with a bolognese, kind of spiced in a Chinese style though. Yeah, it's kind of sort of a mashup, but yeah, Chinese flavors, Italian look, if that makes sense. Couple cool vegetarian sandwiches. One of them is like a sloppy mappo grinder that's on our house-made grinder roll. Basically tastes like mappo tofu, but we make this little kind of vegan meat crumble. But yeah, it's just a big sloppy, delicious vegan sandwich. What else? Kimchi and apple salad is really nice right now. And then on the dessert side, so many good ones. Yeah, we have this nice, very simple donut right now. It's just a nice, crispy on the outside, potato donut, lemon cream inside.
There we go.
I love it. That's Chef David Schrier, who was nominated for a James Beard Award, sort of the Oscar of food, and who's bringing an excellent, legendary hip-hop show with hip-hop legends to Daily Operation this Saturday with Large Professor and J Live and Tablik of Mass Pike. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
our professor didn't show up today, but that's fine. I think we got a great lesson from you, the TA.
Thanks, y'all.
Up next, Colleen Shanley Lovelace, President and CEO of Revitalize Community Development Corporation, and Ethel Griffin, Director of Programs at Revitalize CDC, on the return of Green Fit Springfield, a volunteer cleanup event happening this Saturday.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Green and Fit Springfield is back this Saturday, April 29th, in the Memorial Square neighborhood from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Joining us are 2 of the organizers of the event, Colleen Shanley Lovelace, President and CEO, and Ethel Griffin, Director of Programs, both from Revitalize Community Development Corporation, who happen to be an underwriter of NEPM, full disclosure.
But that's not why we're talking with them. We just think it's great that this event is back and that this neighborhood is a cool neighborhood in Springfield. So tell us, maybe, Ethel, about the neighborhood, Memorial Square, and some of the folks that we can find there, the people that you're working with.
Oh, we're working with a wonderful group of people. We're just so blessed that we're able to help. And the majority of our work is going to be on the outside of the homes. And we have quite a few that'll be working on, handicap ramps. We're helping some with the painting of the house, as well as making sure it's safe and secure for the homeowners. So we have about 12 homes that we'll be working on. And so we're very excited about that. But like I was saying, most of the work are going to be from the outside. We'll be working with helping with the windows. And it's just a lot that we will be doing. So we're excited about it.
And this neighborhood is kind of around Bay State, the hospital, right?
That's correct, yes. We just finished up in 2019 We worked on 10 contiguous blocks in Old Hill neighborhood. And from there, we decided in 2020 to move to the Memorial Square neighborhood based upon the needs expressed from the city, from sponsors and donors and residents of the community. And we were all excited to kick that off in 2020. And obviously, we all know what happened there. And we were
Something happened in
yeah,
2020?
I know. It was.
I am shocked. I tell you, shocked.
So it was very difficult for us because it's an annual event, and then we haven't had it the last 3 years. So we're excited to be back, and 2023 here, and finally kicking off in Memorial Square. We have been working on homes over the last few years, but with mostly contractors to replace roofs and things, but nothing where you can gather 1,000 volunteers together in a day.
And is that how many you have about?
Well, we usually do have about 1,000. This year, I'm a little the possible rain, but it's rain or shine. And 1 year we did have 800 people show up in the rain.
Yes.
Remember?
That's great.
800, yes.
That's pretty fantastic. Are you rolling through the various neighborhoods in Springfield? And I say this in part because I live in McKnight, so I've been at our community meetings. We've been talking with representatives of Revitalize Springfield about our part of Mason Square and some of the things happening there, and a park that's Magazine Park in my neighborhood, I think, is being revitalized. It's not necessarily part of this specific event, but there are other things that your organization does around the city that are pretty cool for just, again, revitalizing.
Right, that's correct. So we work all the neighborhoods of Springfield year-round. We actually work Camden County, Hampshire County, and Franklin County, in fact, because we have some work. We get referrals from Bay State, Mercy, C3, their health centers, and they refer asthma patients and patients that have diabetes. So we have a asthma home repair and education program to eliminate triggers in the home, and then a nutrition program for people who have diabetes. So again, education and counseling. So wherever those patients might be, a Holyoke Medical Center we also work with as well. So that's a separate program from this Green and Fit neighborhood rebuild. But we were founded in 1992, and that was really our annual signature event. It used to be all volunteer, just one day a year. There was not a year-round program like Ethel and I have it going now. So
keeping it green and fit all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I said to her the other day, because it's so much work. There's so much planning involved. It's really almost a year-long process. And I said, boy, Ethel, we created a monster. I said, and really, it's just tremendous. People start calling in January. When can we sign up to volunteer?
Yeah. Speaking of signing up to volunteer, someone who's missed all of the flyers, missed all of the announcements, where do they go to help out?
At revitalizecdc.com, they can register to volunteer. All the information is there, and about where the parking is, and all the logistics and the food. And
do you need
everything.
particular skills to be able to, or is it basically anybody, whatever skills they bring, you're going to find a place for them to work this Saturday?
Whatever skills they bring, where it's just planting flowers, raking a yard, we have a place for them to go. And you were speaking about your neighborhood there. A house was donated to us one time a few years back, and we totally renovated that house in that area. And someone bought it right after then. People was looking at it, and they fell in love with it, and so we sold it to someone else. But it was a wonderful adventure but normally we do not take over a whole house.
You two are ambitious. You've been working together for a long time. You've become like best buddies. You go on vacation together, you were saying, right? Why not? Revitalize the whole city. Revitalize the whole house.
But I was only going to work a month after Colleen came on. And it's only been 15 years, so,
That's the longest month I've heard of.
I know. But I fell in love with what we are doing to help other people, particularly senior citizens and our veterans. And I fell in love with that because they serve our country, and then they come back home, and they are dealing with a house that's falling apart. It is not livable. So we go in there, and we help them to live a fulfilling life.
That's amazing. That's Ethel Griffin, the Director of Programs from Revitalize Community Development, as well as Colleen Shanley Lovelace, the President and CEO. The Green and Fit Springfield event is back on Saturday. Check out their website if you would like to and volunteer. They are an underwriter, but it's just an amazing thing, and that's why we're talking to them. Nothing to do with underwriting. Thank you both so much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're trying to build a community.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, A double, no, a triple shot of live music on Live Music Friday in the fabulous 413.
Langhorne Slim and John Craigie are playing at the Academy of Music in Northampton on Friday night. They'll join us in studio before their show.
And we'll be joined by the elder statesman of the Valley music scene, the legendary Ray Mason.
And we've re-entered the Wine Thunderdome with Michael Quinlan at Table and Vine and Taste Vermentino.
Our director is Tony, you piece of wonderful done.
Our engineer is Betsy, yay, botulism Cortis.
Our technical team is Bart, Indie Rock Gossip Hour Rankin, Kara, Don't Put That in Today's Show Foster, and Punk Rock Dubé, who with all the hip-hop today I'd like to call Chuck D.
Musical thanks to Spouse, Happy Valley Guitar Orchestra, Jay Giles Band, Large Professor, and Acrobatic. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.